Hello, everyone. We're just having a little bit of technical difficulties, but we are getting started. All right. Hello, everyone. Sorry. Hello, everyone. We're just having a little bit of technical difficulties, but we are getting started. Okay, there we go. So hello, everyone. We are having a little bit of technical difficulties getting our senator into our Zoom, but we are going to get started now, and we expect the senator to join us at any second. So if people will just hang on for a few minutes or two, I am going to also provide an update as to what's happening at the LGBT network and what these town halls are about. And please excuse me if you hear any noise. Now that construction has started back in phase 1, a roof is being ripped off right above my head. Good timing for this. So, but welcome everyone to the LGBT Network Town Hall. It's a series of town halls that we're doing, providing really important information from our public officials and our health professionals on what's happening around COVID-19, what the response has been, what actual scientific information is out there. And so we just want to welcome everyone. Again, sorry for that banging if you hear it, but welcome everyone to our virtual town hall series. I want to let everyone know that the LGBT Network, once we had to shut down on March 16th, has opened up its LGBT Network Virtual Center, and you can find out all the amazing programs that are taking place for every single segment of our community, LGBTQ and allied, everything from support, advocacy, organizing, to lots of fun games, movies, and et cetera, to keep us all connected while we are in. So, you know, our motto is that we still can be out while we're in, and we're certainly doing that through our programs. Also want to let everyone know, as we wait for our senator to arrive, that we launched a couple of weeks ago the New York LGBTQ Care Fund, and that was a result of talking with a couple of hundred LGBTQ community members in Long Island and in Queens. And we did a community impact survey to find out, you know, how people are coping with this and what issues are impacting them. You know, and the results were pretty startling, actually, that, you know, we found out that 1 in 3, so, you know, over 33% are facing food insecurity issues. 1 in 5 had immediate housing issues, and, you know, were concerned about having a roof over their head. Also, we found out that nearly 70% are suffering extreme anxiety during this time of isolation. And what's important to remember here is that a lot of these issues existed pre-COVID-19 for the LGBTQ community, but they certainly are exasperated right now during this time. So we have to make sure that we respond and are able to help people who need it the most. And LGBT organizations like the LGBT Network and many others that exist in our area and across the country are really the ones on the front line fighting for the LGBTQ community. And we've been doing that for a long time. And we have our esteemed guest here now who has joined us. Welcome, Senator Schumer.
Nice to see you, David.
Nice to see you too, and welcome. I was just giving folks an update as to what's happening around our virtual work and the LGBTQ Care Fund that we started to help LGBTQ New Yorkers who are most in need, particularly around food insecurity and mental health. And then yesterday, you know, we're entering Pride Month, and Pride is not just an event, it's a state of being. And so we announced our virtual NY Pride event, and that's virtualnypride.org, where people can go and get involved and be ready for a fantastic live streaming event that we're going to have on June 14th. And instead of having the traditional grand marshals, we are honoring all our LGBTQ heroes on the front line. So we have so many, it's amazing. And we're asking people to help us and send us your heroes. Just go to virtualnypride.org, and there's a link there to send us your heroes so we can make sure that all these selfless individuals who have doctors, nurses, grocery workers, delivery folks, UPS, FedEx, you name it, police officers, all the folks that are out there fighting this disease and fighting for our community. We want to recognize them, and so please send us your heroes. But today, thank you, Chuck. Today we are we are going to be talking about the federal response to COVID-19, protecting New York, and also advancing equality in DC. And we are fortunate to have one of the most powerful and respected leaders in the nation with us here today. As New York Senior Senator, Charles Schumer has been a tireless advocate for all New Yorkers. As the Democratic leader of the United States Senate, and I am hoping to God that we call him majority leader of the Senate next year at this time, he has never passed up a fight for the values that protect equality and justice for all, especially LGBTQ people everywhere. Our senator is Brooklyn born and bred. He has served as the United States Senator for more than 2 decades. It not only serves as a senator, but he makes sure that he gets around the entire state and really cares about every single New Yorker, and that is so evident. He was elected Democratic leader of the United States Senate since 2017. He holds a phenomenal record of delivering for New York, bringing $20 billion home to rebuild after 9/11, and $63 billion in recovery after Superstorm Sandy. And we know that he's going to lead the way as New York recovers now from this pandemic. He is a leading advocate for the vote and passage of the Equality Act, often calling on Senate Majority Leader McConnell to hold a vote in the United States Senate. Remember that. He's calling on the Senate Majority Leader McConnell to hold a vote in the United States Senate. If we had Senate Majority Leader Schumer, that vote would be taking place and we'd have the Equality Act passed once and for all. Just important for everyone to think about that. He's passionate about LGBT rights, acting as a champion for marriage equality and standing up to President Trump against his continued bullying of LGBT, immigrant Americans, pretty much every American. So thank you, United States Senator leader, Democratic leader, Charles Schumer, for all that you have done for LGBTQ people and every marginal group everywhere over your 2 decades in the Senate and before that. You are truly a champion and a leader our nation needs now. So welcome to our Senator, Chuck Schumer.
Well, thank you, David. Thank you for the great job you do with the LGBT network, and thank you everybody for listening. This is a momentous time. First, I hope everyone is staying safe. I finished negotiating the COVID-3 bill 8 weeks ago, Wednesday. That's today's Thursday, so 8 weeks ago in a day. We voted it. I finished negotiating with Mnuchin. We voted at 11. I got in my car at midnight, got back to my apartment in Brooklyn at 4:30 a.m. And since then, I've been in this apartment, except when McConnell's made us go down to Washington, not even to do COVID stuff, but to do right-wing judges and others, and attack Obama and attack Biden. I mean, it's just a disgrace what he's doing. But in any case, the only people I've stayed in this apartment ever since, except going out for a walk or a bike ride, I only have physically touched 6 people, my wife, my daughter-in-law and son, and my daughter and son-in-law who came to live with us with my 16-month-old grandson. So I've got to spend, the only good part of this COVID crisis is that you get to be with family, and my daughter and daughter-in-law. And I'm going to tell you a story about that because it's relevant and I haven't told it in a while. Sure. It's about my daughter and daughter-in-law. As some of you who have been old timers in the movement know, I was one of the first to come out, one of the early ones to come out for gay marriage. Why did I do that? Well, when I was in the House, I sat next to Barney Frank, who was a brilliant Congress member, but you may remember he was outed and he fled to London and everyone thought, oh boy, Is he going to stay? And I would call him every 6 hours or so and say, Barney, you're great. Stay. You're needed here. So some people won't like that you're gay. Big deal. He comes back, and over the next few months, I noticed he had become a much happier person. He had gotten the secret burden off his shoulders. And someone came to me about 6 months later and was writing for some magazine and asked me, how is Barney adjusting? And I told him this. Okay. I told him this, and it was in a magazine. I didn't know much about it, but it evidently had some circulation in the LGBT community. Within the next 12 years, I counted 8 people came to me and said the same thing, all on their own. Hi, we were friends in college. You didn't know it. I was gay. I was a lesbian. Now I'm out, and just like Barney, I'm much happier. Okay, so I come out for gay marriage. Now, fast forward. And I got some flack at the time, so be it. So my daughter is working in San Francisco, my younger daughter, Allison, and she calls up my wife and I and says, next time you're out here, let's have a quiet dinner. We go to the quiet dinner. She tells us she's gay. Okay. I had no idea. I had no idea. And as we leave the restaurant, my wife, Iris, says to me, how do you feel about this? And I said, I don't know. Let me get my arms around it. And I go to sleep on it. You ever go to bed at night and you wake up, something's on your mind and you resolve it when you wake up? What I resolved when I woke up, she's the same person I loved so much yesterday as today, except I love her even a little more because she's carried this secret with such strength and grace and dignity. Okay. And now she's getting married to a beautiful young lady from Texas. Well, it's exactly the same as my older daughter. One of our friends has a party for us where we invite the New York establishment, so I don't have to invite them to the wedding. 400 invitations go out. Allison to Elizabeth. No one says a peep. It just happens. The party's the same. The marriage is the same. They're planning their lives, where to live, how to have children, when to have children. Everything is the same. And I realized, had I not done what I did, and look, it gives me strength about government, which is going to relate to COVID in a second. Here, I was an elected official. I did the right thing based on my experiences. And now it's even benefited my own family. So it's a nice story, and it shows you that we need to be involved in government to do good things. COVID says the same thing. Some of our Republican friends say, let the private sector do it all. But when you have something that is so important, you need government to be involved. And that's what we have learned. The first 3 COVID bills, McConnell and Trump said, let's do the minimum possible. And we Democrats stuck together and said, we are not going to let them do the minimum possible. They put all the pressure on us. Pass the bill, pass the bill. The first bill was basically a corporate America bill. It gave $400 billion to corporations with no accountability. It did give a $1,200 check to people who made less than $75,000, but typical of Trump, it was regressive. If you were poor, you only got $600. We added a bunch of things into that bill. Healthcare crisis, some of the people you're honoring. And by the way, this will be the first gay pride parade I'm not marching in. I was the first to march as a senator in 1999, and I marched every year since, now with my daughter and her wife and our whole family, and I'll miss it. But next year we'll all be back, God willing, and it'll be bigger and better than ever. But I'm glad you're honoring those people, and I salute them. And if you give me a few names, I can post them on my website.
Oh, definitely. We'll send them to you. Yes.
Yeah, on my Twitter, I have 2.3 million followers, so people will see it, I guess. Anyway.
But I bet you don't have any disclaimers on your Twitter for the information you're posting, right?
No. I tweeted this morning, I said, if Trump doesn't like Twitter so much, let him stop tweeting and he'll do everybody a favor.
Exactly.
But in any case, their bill was really a bad bill. We had 2 watchwords as a united Democratic Senate. One, a Marshall Plan for health care and hospitals, and we added $150 billion to the bill to give money to healthcare providers, to hospitals, for PPE, for the people working there, for ventilators, for beds, very flexible. And New York has gotten a lot of that money, over $25 billion. So it's really helped our hospitals, including many in Queens and Long Island, where your network has its roots. Second, we said a bill for workers, not corporations. And we put in pandemic unemployment insurance, which says that if you lose your job, the federal government will pay your full salary up to 75,000, almost that if you're higher. And it applied across the board, not just to traditionally unemployed, but to part-time workers, to gig workers, to freelancers, to anybody, self-employed. And it's much easier now to apply. The first few weeks, things were jammed up. So if you need this or your friends need it, tell them to reapply, even if they were rejected the first time. And it's retroactive to March 20th. So that's a very good thing. And it allows the employer, even when you're getting this pandemic unemployment insurance, to furlough you, not fire you. You'd still get the unemployment. And that means you could keep whatever benefits you might have, health or insurance or pension. And it means when this is over, this expires July 31st. We're now trying to extend it to December 31st in the COVID-4 bill, that you can go back to your job without any harm done. So this is a good thing. Then we did the PPP, the small business money. Again, same thing. You could pay your workers and you'd get, then it wasn't enough, 25% extra for other expenses. And we made sure this applied to nonprofits. So any of you who are involved in the nonprofit world, make sure it happens. Now, initially the rollout was terrible. The administration let it go to the people who had friends in the banking industry and didn't put constraints on the banks. But we have now in the second bill, the COVID 3.5, where they again said, let's just give more money to this. No, we said the smaller businesses, the unbanked businesses, the minority businesses, the rural businesses weren't getting enough money. So we walled off an extra 125 billion that wouldn't go to the big shots, even the middle-sized big shots, but would go to the smaller. And just today, I was on the phone pushing Mnuchin. CDFEs, which are community development financial institutions, which serve the little communities and the poorer communities and minority in particular, is getting 10 billion of that walled off. So that is very, very important. And so so the bill is improved. And again, if you're a small business or a nonprofit, or you know someone who applied and was rejected, do it again. Because we keep pushing this administration, which is only interested in helping the powerful and the wealthy by and large, to spread it out much better, and it's working better. So people should definitely look at that. We also put in some money for state and local governments. That was the Republicans resisted, 125 billion. New York State got 10 billion of that, 5 that they could use as they wished. Some of it's going for housing now. 4 billion for the MTA. Those of you either in Queens or Long Island may depend on it, and they were going to go broke. So I got 4 billion for them, and 1 billion for education. So schools weren't increased, but they weren't cut. And that went directly to the school district. So the state couldn't keep it for itself. In the COVID-4 bill, we have much, much more. We have $1 trillion for state and local. It's really needed. And because, you know, McConnell gets up and says, these are big blue state governments. They're not governments. They're workers. Yeah. They're bus drivers. They're food workers, healthcare workers, nurses. And they get laid off, it's going to hurt our economy. And if the states have no money, or the cities have no money, the localities, it would be terrible. In this bill, New York City would do very well. So would Nassau and Suffolk counties, and all the towns and villages within Nassau County. They get money directly, not going through the state. It was a formula that I put together, and it makes it's going to make a significant difference to people. Also in the bill is what we call hazard pay. The people you're talking about, David, who are on the front lines, they have a lot of expenses. I met a guy named Recto online he's a home care worker. Very nice man. He's maybe an illegal immigrant, I don't know, or undocumented, but he's a fine person. And he would take care of 2 elderly people. Being a home health care worker, he got paid next to nothing, probably not much more than minimum wage. And every day, get on the bus, go take care of these 2 people and go home. COVID came, no bus. Recto pays for a cab himself. He cares so much about the people he's caring for, and the guy has no money. So we have proposed $13 extra an hour hazard pay for frontline workers of all types. And that will be very important in the bill. We also have monies to help make sure there's a free election and people can vote by mail. Trump is going to try to screw around with the election. We have no doubt about it. It's all about Trump. That's all he cares about is himself. And if he thinks he's going to lose, who knows what he'll do. So we give money so that everyone can vote by mail. And we go again, we're going to try if we can get it passed, undo some of the restrictions that particularly the southern states, so poorer people and people of color can't vote. There are many, many more things in the bill. There's money for the post offices. There's money for OSHA to protect workers in the COVID-4 bill. Will we pass it? And here's one way you can all help. McConnell has always said, he always starts off saying, we're not going to pass anything. We don't need the money. Let the private sector do it. Of course, as I mentioned, without the government, your private sector can't get us out of a problem that's so grave. And the other week, he said, I don't see any urgent or immediate need. Here we have cars lined up for miles for food banks. We have people getting kicked out of their homes. We have people who are unemployed, small business people who've worked so hard to build their businesses going under it. He doesn't see a need. So the House passed a strong bill. It's controlled by Democrats. And we in the Senate are pushing McConnell to vote on that bill or get something very close to it. He's feeling the heat. And the one way you can all help, your two senators are on your side, whether it's LGBT issues or just these general COVID issues that affect all of humanity. But if you have friends, relatives, associates in states with Republican senators, get them to call and say, we need to pass some more stuff. The Republican senators are feeling the heat, but they're very much afraid of McConnell and Trump. But the more pressure we can put on them, the better we'll do. And it worked the last few times where the bills got considerably better. So hopefully we can do that again. With that, I think, David, who's on the phone? Julieta? From my team.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I haven't left anything out here. They give me notes, but I just freelance usually.
Well, I mean, it really sounds like, and we know that from you being our senator, that you're always on the front lines fighting for everyone and really understanding the needs of all of our constituencies and all of our community members, and that's clearly evident. And a lot of the things that you mentioned, I'm sure many people who are with us here today, either on Zoom or on Facebook Live today, are nodding their head saying, yeah, that was me. I understand, and when you talked about the PPP and how nonprofits are able to access that, it was real difficult for us. We got it the second round, but we got it the second round because it was open to some of those other banking institutions. And, we were very thankful for Bethpage Federal Credit Union.
There you go. The credit unions had been excluded the first time, and by the second time they're in. So if you have a small, David, let me underline it. If you have a small business and you applied the first time and got rejected, it's now much better. We forced them to improve it. Sorry.
Oh, no, please. And what's also important is that, and I guess we've heard that the EIDL loans, the economic, I always forget what the I stands for, the economic disaster loans,
Right.
that has dried up, right? Which I know a lot of our nonprofits.
We put much more money into COVID-4 because there you don't even have to go through a bank. And so they've dried up. We put in new money in COVID 3.5. The administration did it for farms and nobody else. We've been pushing them now to expand it, and the likelihood is they will expand it relatively soon.
Oh, all right.
Haven't done it yet.
That's positive news. So there's a lot going on. Is part of this COVID-4 Act the HEROES Act, or is that?
Yes, the HEROES and COVID-4 are the same. Nancy calls it the HEROES Act. I'm calling it COVID-4. We're usually on the same page. We got to get together on this too. See, we had originally called this frontline worker thing the HEROES Act in the Senate. So she made the whole big thing the HEROES Act. So it's called the HEROES Act. HEROES Act or COVID-4 or CARES 2. It has 3 different names. It's the same bill. It's the bill that passed the House.
Sure. We do have a question right now that is still on this topic here, and it's from Colin, who asks, do you have any info about how federal response monies for testing and healthcare supports will trickle into the communities?
Yes.
We just don't need dollars from the banks to sustain paychecks. We need federal dollars directly supporting COVID health.
We put in the first bill, we put $25 billion in for testing. This administration has been a utter failure on testing. And, if you look at other countries that have climbed the COVID mountain and now are getting much better, much more quickly and adeptly than us, it's because most of them have done testing. It's amazing. And 6 countries are models: Singapore, Hong Kong. Of course, now there's problems in Hong Kong of a different sort. Australia, New Zealand, Germany, and Finland. They put in a lot of testing immediately, and it worked. It worked. By the way, of those 6 countries, 5 have women heads of state, I hasten to add, which says something. But in any case, we need that testing, and we push the administration to do it, and Trump doesn't do it. We have money for it. We have something called the Defense Production Act, which would allow the federal government to commandeer the factories and order the tests that are done. And let me just give you an example. When New Rochelle closed down, they were the first city quarantined in the country. They're a city in Westchester. I called the mayor. What do you need? He said, give me 70,000 tests. I'll test everybody, 70,000 residents. Someone who has COVID or has the virus will say, stay inside for 2 weeks and we'll get you health care if you need it. Everyone else, you're okay, because no one from COVID will be out on the streets, shop on the streets, go to work, etc. That's what we need. And businesses are being hurt. You can open up your business, but if your customers are afraid to go into your business because they might get COVID, so you need this testing, and Trump has been an abject failure. We continue to hammer at him for this testing. The new COVID bill has even more money, but the problem is the bills we passed are all quite good in many ways, but you can't get the administration to enforce them, sometimes out of malice, sometimes out of incompetence. But testing is the bottom line that we need, and they have failed. And Trump is gonna be remembered for that. Someone told me, a great epidemiologist, said that if we had had testing, the number of illnesses would, from the beginning when we should have. Remember, Trump said we don't need to. First, he said it's a hoax. Then he said it'll go away in a month. Then on March 6th or 7th or something, he said anyone who wants a test can get one, which of course was a total lie. That should have been noted by Twitter, but they weren't doing it then, I guess. This epidemiologist said if we had had adequate testing, we probably have many fewer deaths and many fewer cases, but we haven't. So we keep pushing them on it, and any pressure you can put on your people, we should do that. The COVID-4 bill has even more money for testing, and it goes to the communities, not through any federal agency, especially the communities most afflicted. There should be testing in Corona Queens. There should be testing in the poorest neighborhoods because they have it the worst. And we do that in this bill. So we'll see if it passes.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. You talked about the failure of leadership, right? The failure of leadership, no compassion, for most Americans. And, and we hear our, candidate that's going to be running on the Democratic side for President, Joe Biden, and I have to give a disclaimer, this is not on behalf of the LGBT network, but I am a delegate for Joe Biden, and I feel real strongly about him. And, that he talks about this being an election for the soul of our nation. Maybe if you could talk about that a little bit.
I think that's true. I think that the Trump administration, he ran as a populist against the Democratic and Republican establishments. But once the primary was over, he embraced the hard right. And his government has favored the powerful interests who don't need help over everybody else. They've been brutal on the LGBT community, on women, on minorities, on immigrants. Not what America's all about. The soul of America is about inclusiveness. The soul of America is about the government helping people build ladders so they can climb up and create a life of dignity for themselves and their families. And Trump is inimical to the soul. I'll give you one little data point, which will give you a little hope. There was a recent survey. They asked Trump voters, a broad sample of Trump voters, people who voted for him in 2016, would you consider not voting for Trump because of the way would you seriously consider not voting for Trump because of the way he handled the COVID crisis? And guess what? 15% said yes. And when you analyze it, it wasn't because he's a liar. They knew that. It wasn't because he's an infantile narcissist. They knew that. It was for the first time not only did they doubt his competence, but they thought his lack of competence affected them. If that stays, it'll be a landslide. Who knows if it will? But it is about the soul of America. This is such an important election, and I'm going to throw in my little commercial. Even if we get a Democratic president, if we don't get a Democratic Senate, which I would be fortunate to be the majority leader of, they'll block everything. McConnell still won't put the Equality Act on the floor. I'll put the Equality Act on the floor within the first few months of being majority leader. It's the way the Senate works. The majority leader has enormous power, and he or she has the sole power to determine what goes on the floor. He's afraid because of the Christian evangelicals who don't want him to do anything for LGBTQ rights. They want him to make it worse. But I'll put it on the floor and it will pass. Jeff Merkley's the sponsor. He's counting votes diligently. It'll pass. So it is about the soul of America, and we can take it back. We can take it back. And I please urge you to urge all of the people you know, particularly younger people, who say, politics, we need them to vote. This is crucial.
And voting is so important. You know, listen, as a nonprofit, as a 501c3 nonprofit, you know, we certainly can't endorse anyone, but what we need to do is, and it's our responsibility, I believe strongly, to get out there and educate the community about the implications of our votes.
Just ask them. You can ask them to vote. You don't have to tell them who.
Yeah, no, that is true. It's definitely go to the ballot box, but I think it's about understanding what our vote really means. And so,
and by the way, all nonprofits, this I fought for, all nonprofits are included just like for-profit businesses in this PPP. And since you don't pay taxes, you actually get a payment from the federal government for the grants.
And it's real important. I mean, you know, as we wait, as most nonprofits rely pretty much heavily on government funding to provide services that we do at a much lower cost.
One of the reasons I pushed for them is because you're right. The social services that we need more desperately now than we've ever needed are basically provided by nonprofits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they are. I mean, nonprofits are on the front lines right now too. Nonprofit workers who are who have been out there during the whole COVID-19 crisis are frontline heroes too. Those working in child protective services, those working in the HIV field, those working in group homes, disability, you name it. And nonprofit folks are out there fighting hard right now, keeping things going and helping people. You know, but just going back for a second in terms of why it matters who is the majority of who runs the majority in the Senate. I think we need to take a look at the Supreme Court of the United States.
Yes.
And know where that leans right now. And I just want to bring up a case that is before the Supreme Court right now, Zarda versus Altitude Express. And so let me just give our viewers a little background on that. You know,
Long Island case. It's a Long Island case.
It is a Long Island case, and we're waiting the ruling on this, which is a case concerning employment discrimination based upon sexual orientation. And so after revealing his sexual orientation, Don Zarda was fired. It was a skydiving business out in, I believe, Yaphank in Suffolk County. The termination followed a history of anti-gay encounters from the employer. Now, you know, I would completely understand if so many folks out there didn't have too much confidence in this current Supreme Court to rule against discrimination. But what would be your prediction in how the Supreme Court would rule? And
I don't trust this court. I mean, we put out a paper yesterday, Sheldon Whitehouse, a senator from Rhode Island, Debbie Stabenow, a senator from Michigan, and myself, that shows how the dark money has the hard right dark money, some of it from the Christian right, anti-LGBTQ, some of it from the sort of economic right, no taxes, no business regulation, has sort of captured the courts. And they put in hundreds of millions of dollars at the end of the day, one way or another, into making the courts far more political and listening to the hard right. The hard right knows that their views are so far away from where America is that they need the non-elected branch of government, in a sense, to enforce it. And that's probably true on LGBTQ rights, where a majority of Americans are for no discrimination. But I'm worried that this court, the real answer, folks, change the Senate. We will change the Supreme Court. McConnell will block anything, even if we elect Biden, that a Democratic president would be. And if Trump's president, I won't let him put another right winger on there. But if we change the Senate, we can put the Equality Act on the floor, as I said, in the next 3 months, and then you won't even need a case like Zara because the law will be clear. You can't discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation.
That's a great point. That's a great point. And that's why it's important that people know what their vote means,
Yep.
right? And what their, and who not only the next president of the United States is, but who is
Right.
who holds the majority in the Senate.
Right.
So extremely important. So maybe we could just shift a little bit to talk about COVID-19 tracking and the collection of data on sexual orientation and gender identity. I know we've been talking about this issue at the LGBT network. We got a lot of questions beforehand. And by the way, people, if you have any questions, you could post them in the Q&A.
Although I only have time for one more, David. I got
Oh, okay, sorry about that.
Okay, it's okay.
You're a busy man, I forget.
Yeah, oh, but I always have time. I just gotta divide it up, you know.
So, currently there's no tracking of data of the 1.7 million cases of COVID-19 and sexual orientation in general.
Right.
And this lack of data affects our community, will only exacerbate the challenges that we're already experiencing during this public health emergency. So maybe if you could talk to us a little bit. Last week, over 100 members of Congress sent a letter to the Department of Health and Human Services and called on the Trump administration to collect information on sexual orientation and gender identity of COVID-19 patients.
Okay.
Maybe if you could just give us
Sure.
an update.
Well, we put in COVID-19 that Congress, we told the administration they had to issue a report how different demographics were affected, and that included the LGBT community.
Mhm.
Minority community, women, all kinds of different cross-cutting things. They're basically ignoring it. They put out a report that said nothing, virtually nothing. It was just unacceptable. It was a few pages long, just linked to existing resources. It didn't research the LGBT community, and that's who they are. So, sure, somebody can go to court and say, you got to do this, and it'll take months and months and months, long after the money is out. So we got to keep pushing heat on them, keep putting heat on them to do this. Sometimes one of the biggest problems we have in COVID is not the legislation we pass, but the implementation of it, where this administration, more than any other I've ever seen, just does whatever the hell it wants, regardless of the law. They're a lawless administration. That's one of the reasons I think Joe Biden talked about soul of America. We're a nation of rule of law. Donald Trump has tried to undercut rule of law at every opportunity, including this one right here. So we got to keep pushing them, but they're sons of guns, and the hard right runs the show, and the hard right is an amalgam of the economic right wing and the religious right wing, and we're caught in the crosshairs.
Well, again, thank you so much for, we know how busy you are, not only in dealing with, the current issues, but in fighting and making sure that all Americans are treated equal and have the rights that we should have, the access to healthcare, and pretty much everything else. And so we appreciate you taking the time today with us. And we know that people had a lot more questions, but we know that our Senator Chuck Schumer, we don't only see him here on our screen, but when it is okay to do so, you definitely will see Senator Schumer in our communities, no matter where you are.
And any further questions or specific issues, if you contact David, he'll be in touch. I have a great office. I owe everything to my staff who work so hard, and they'll be available to you. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you. So yes, please send your questions over to us. Thank you, Senator Schumer. Next year, hopefully we'll have a town hall where we'll be introducing you as our majority leader. Everyone, go out and vote.
Be safe, everybody. Be safe. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.